Cool. So I'm here to talk a little bit about hypothesis-based product management, right? And this is a topic that I work with every day, which is pretty interesting. It's something that I believe deeply as being one of the best ways to work with product management. And yeah, let's jump right into it.
The Madness Tech community connects tech enthusiasts in the field of data, front-end, product, and cloud native. Subscribe now and feel free to join our community and meetups. Events and groups are listed below, and now follow us into the rabbit hole.
My name is Tobias Rieth. I am a senior product manager at Soundcloud. I worked before as a PM also in retail, banking, hospitality, and other industries as well. This is my SoundCloud page, so if you're not on SoundCloud already, give it a try. You can find me there. And yeah, let's jump right in. Today's topic and me first, just a little bit of why I decided to talk about hypothesis-based product management. And I wrote there, a story of how fall in love with the problem and not the solution is easier said than done. And to me, this is something that I struggled a little bit when I was starting with product management. You know, you start thinking a lot about the problem, you start thinking about a solution, you care deeply for the solution, you think of the best designs, you kind of go hard trying to kind of implement the best thing ever, then you implement it, and what happens? Nothing happens, right? So you kind of start getting desperate a little bit, you try to iterate a little bit more on that idea that you implemented, users still don't love it. And in the end, what happens is that you fell in love with the solution instead of the problem, right? So that's something that happened to me a lot in the beginning of my career, and finding hypotheses and ways of working with them kind of helped me a lot in overcoming this. So that's why I decided to talk a little bit about it, right? So what we're going to be talking about today, why to use hypothesis, first of all. Then we're going to talk about the hypothesis itself and how it's structured, hypothesis and backlog, and we're going to do some closing remarks. I expect not to take a lot of time to present. I think that it would be nice if we could have a little bit of Q&A and discussion. So it should take around 20 to 25 minutes to present, and then let's jump into Q&A in the end. Right, so why to use hypothesis? This is the first part, right? I wanted to also talk a little bit about some advantages from this framework, in my opinion, of course. So everything that you will see here is according to my experience and my opinion and kind of things that I did that worked out and other things that failed miserably. So yeah, take this is pretty much my opinion, and then it will be great, and after on Q&A, to hear other opinions, other experiences, and things like that, right? So first, let's imagine the following scenario. I wanted to propose like a comparison and kind of draw with you together here a situation that we can analyze together, right? So let's say that there's a problem, right? Let's consider two different conversion teams in two different e-commerce websites. Pretty common when you have our e-commerce, right? That you'll have a team that it's called a conversion team, the team that is trying to make people buy more stuff a lot of the times, right? Let's imagine that there's two completely different teams, two different conversion teams in two separate places in the world, and they both start having the same problem. Add to cart rates are dropping, right? And add to cart rates are, it's the rate of the amount of times that users that go into your website, they add something to the cart, right? This is something that it's specifically helpful to know when you have an e-commerce. Obviously, you want more people buying stuff in your website. And definitely this is something that you'll be looking into. And let's create the scenario where these two different teams in two different places have this problem happening at the same time, right? Let's take a look at roadmap number one. This is the team number one working, right? And they look at this problem, they say, we're going to solve it, we're going to do a lot of improvements, and we're going to have better product pictures on the PDP or product detail page, right? So we're going to put a lot of great pictures in there. And after that, we're going to work in redesigning the add to cart button, right? And there's also a third thing that we're still figuring out. We know that kind of roadmaps are always really clear for the upcoming month or two, but a little bit unclear for everything else. So let's say that they have these ideas that they deeply believe in, and they're going with it. And now let's take a look at the second roadmap for the second team. The second team has a different type of roadmap, a different type of backlog. The first thing that they have is a statement there. If we improve picture quality, then more users will add stuff in their cart, right? And then the second thing that they have is coming up is a different statement. If we improve UX for the add to cart button, then more users will add to cart. And there's also like a third thing that they are kind of still figuring out, right? My question for you would be, what is the differences between these two here? Are there any differences at all? Because if you look at thinking about kind of the first, for instance, better product pictures on PDP, and if we improve picture quality, then more users will add stuff in their cart. There's a case to be made that the outcome can be the same, right? That there's a chance that they will be doing the same thing. But there's a main difference here that I think it's when we start seeing a little bit of the topic that I wanted to talk about today, right? So if we isolate these two here, the first one is a feature improvement, right? So stating clearly about what it's going to be done. The second one is a hypothesis, right? A statement about something that we believe that might happen, right? And to me, this is where we see the first core difference of working with hypothesis and product management, right? A feature improvement says we're doing it because it will work, so we put a priority on it, we put a priority on making this feature improvement, and we're doing it because we think it will work, right? A hypothesis in the other way around says if we do this, we believe it might work, right? So it's completely different in that sense. Either, like in any case, the outcome can be the same, but the position that it takes in the backlog, it's completely different, right? If you think about it, when you're prioritizing any feature, you have a problem, then you brainstorm about this problem, right? And then you have an idea, and then you user test, and then you run data analysis in order to be really sure about it, right? So I think that everybody that worked in a tech company or in a product team, or it's been a PM, or worked in design, or been a developer, kind of knows that this is a little bit kind of a simplified view of what we are trying to do, right? We have this problem, we're brainstorming new ideas, we're user testing, so the user have a say on it and we can see if the idea stands, and then we have data analysis. And of course, after that, you're going for an implementation, but even with the implementation, you're going for an MVP, right? The most valuable product that you can find, right? You're trying to do something really small that can you can move forward with, so it's a kind of a path of going from 0% of certainty into some certain degree of certainty, right? So when you have a problem, you don't know anything. But once we start brainstorming, having ideas, you user tests, you look at data, you have data analysis, you start to have some degree of certainty about this problem or about the solution that you want to implement. However, the problem with that, to me, that kind of goes a little bit what we were talking about before, the feature improvement, that is something that we believe that will work, versus the hypothesis that is a strong belief that we have, is that you can be really great at brainstorming, you can have the best ideas, you can be an absolute genius on user testing, you can be a brilliant analyst and look at data, and you can be a great team that implements things really fast and you have an MVP out of the door quickly. But before it is out in the hands of the user, there's no chance that you're going to be 100% sure. You can be the best PM, the best team in the world. You cannot be 100% sure. It's simply impossible, right? We're just trying to move from 0% of certainty to some degree of certainty, right? So saying that this will work, having a feature improvement in the roadmap in a certain way, to me, it's a little bit of kind of not lying, but working in a dangerous territory in a way, right? And let's see the implications of it going back to this team here. Let's say that the strong belief on the product improvement was done and better product features on PDP on the product detail page were done. And also the other team that was doing the same thing, but as a hypothesis, they also kind of wanted to test this hypothesis out, right? And let's create a scenario where both things are done, but add to cart rates, our original problem, it's not solved. So the add to cart rates, they don't go up, right? So you have on one side one team that was saying that I think we know that it will work. We have this product improvement here, a feature improvement that we're going to do. This team, if you think about it, the product improvement failed, and hence the team failed as well. On the other way around, for the hypothesis team, in their case, the hypothesis was debunked. It was simply not true. And in place of that, the team learned something new. So you can see how it's all about positioning as well, right? And kind of working in this level of uncertainty and not being sure of anything, that hypothesis starts showing their value, right? So this is one of the first things that I wanted to kind of call out, that it's really interesting, right? And let's see it a little bit into the future, right? So the team one is going to the second feature improvement. We extra pressure to deliver, right? So they're going to, okay, we failed the first time, so the second time we better get it right. While the other team is going to the second hypothesis they're going to validate with eager to learn more, right? And here I'm bringing the first advantage, in my opinion, because you're keeping it real while keeping it humble, right? The truth is nobody knows the truth until it manifests itself. It's impossible to know if something is going to work or not. It's just simply too hard to be 100% sure of what's going to happen. And this is where hypotheses start to shine, because you're not saying that it's going to happen, but you're going to pursue a validation of it and try to learn through it, right? And that there's a part here of the quotation, truth until it manifests itself, that it's interesting. We're going to go into detail a little bit on that. But I wanted to keep moving forward with scenarios here for these two teams and what's happening with them, right? Let's imagine that the second time they worked and they tried out, things worked out, and the add to cart, the first team did a redesign and the other team had this hypothesis: if they improve the UX of the add to cart button, the more users will add to cart. Both worked, it's great. The add to cart rates are going up. This is awesome. But let's imagine that the first team just created a feature, rolled out, and watched the numbers, right? So, we're going to take a look at the rates before. We know that we rolled out in this specific day, and now this number is going up. While the second team run an A/B test where add to cart was the success metric, right? And this is, I think, really important. Before, in the first point that I wanted to make, it's all about proving a point, right? And kind of watching the truth manifest itself, right? And obviously, you can see here that I'm making a little bit of extrapolations in these two cases, but it's just to kind of move forward with the discussion and make a point here, right? The team that just kind of rolled out something and then watched the numbers saw correlation, right? And correlation says it might be it, right? So I'm watching the numbers before we did something and then the numbers increased. That's great. It was around the same time, so it makes a lot of sense, right? However, there can be a lot of seasonalities. Let's say that this team specifically is in the United States and they are 2 days before Christmas. So you have a seasonality there that makes the add to cart rate go up, right? So it's not that you, by just rolling it out something, you couldn't validate if it was going to happen. While the other team, because of the A/B test, they have causation. And correlation and causation is totally completely different things, right? With causation, this team that run the A/B test can say it is exactly because of it that the add to cart rates increased. And can be a lot of reasons why team A didn't run an A/B test in order to see that. But when you have a hypothesis, if we improve UX for the add to cart button, then more users will add to cart. You're already kind of presenting an experiment that you want to run and impact that you want to see. And this all kind of helps into planning an experiment later on, right? So that's something that I wanted to also bring as an advantage of using hypothesis. It forces you to take a scientific approach in a way, right? You can only validate or debunk hypothesis if you can prove causation in a way. And then I wanted to keep looking at this scenario with you, and hopefully we'll be getting questions from all of that we'll be able to discuss later on. But let's imagine a grim scenario where this didn't happen. This didn't improve the rates, right? So this is completely kind of panicking in the first team. Like the second thing we tried out, it's going wrong, we didn't improve it. Well, the second team, another hypothesis that failed. Maybe we'll need to revisit our strategy here. Let's imagine possible things that would happen, right? With the first team, okay, we just roll out two things. We rolled out like the iteration on the design on add to cart button. We try to improve pictures. Let's think about these two ideas. Let's think about these two previous ideas and try to improve them. There's something in it, right? Because we already committed a lot of time and we already kind of did this improvement and we said that it was going to work, so it should better work. We just need more time. Whereas the other team, because it's going through this process of validating hypotheses and kind of learning along the way, they might stop and look at all the things that they learned so far and say, what are the other hypotheses that we can formulate here? Perhaps add to cart doesn't have anything to do with the page that we work on or with the button or if anything like that. It can be around pricing. Maybe it can be around the search page, right? And let's say that if they kind of formulate this hypothesis, if we improve search results, more users will find what they are looking for and add more to their carts, right? And this is a little bit kind of another point that I wanted to make, that to me is an advantage of using hypothesis, right? Because you're validating them, you're moving to kind of learn more. It's way easier to go back to the original problem and try to iterate on top of it once again. Whereas the other one, if you have a roadmap that you've been improving something and improving something and improving something, it's way easier to tunnel vision into just keep improving what already exists and trying to optimize, right? So the team one is pressured by promising results when rolling out their new features. They will move into iterating on them. And the team two, fueled by knowing what's not working, will think of more hypothesis to test. And the third one, to me, this is kind of another advantage that I just mentioned. It keeps your focus on the problem, right? And the solutions, they become more easily discardable in a way. And this is the point that I've made in the beginning. In the beginning of my career, we would improve a feature and then improve the feature and then try something else on top of the feature and add things to it, expecting that it will work. Where actually the solution was coming back, taking a broader approach and trying to diverge a little bit more in the design process, think about different solutions to test, and once again, move forward with a different approach, right? These are only three advantages that I see for using hypotheses that to me are kind of big reasons for why adopting this type of working for creating your backlog works really well. And obviously there are more advantages to it, and there's probably also some things that are not so good about it, but I wanted to bring these three here to discuss today. After looking at this exercise, I talked a lot about the hypothesis, about using hypothesis and kind of using it and creating a roadmap. And the next question that can come up is, okay, what is a great hypothesis then? How can I formulate one? How can I structure it, right? And I wanted just to talk a little bit about the hypothesis now to see how you can start also fabricating some good ones in the products that you work on, right? So this is the common template slide that I bring a definition from a dictionary for use, but I think this one is actually a really good one from Oxford. A hypothesis is a supposition or a proposed explanation made on the basis of limited evidence as starting point for further investigation, right? So it's almost like a kickoff or something, you know? And there's some key elements to this sentence that I wanted to kind of talk a little bit more. A supposition or a proposed explanation, this is where having ideas come from, right? This is the brainstorm process. Well, I think that this is happening, and I know that everybody here, at least I worked in a lot of companies where a lot of people wanted to have opinions, right? And I think that this is going to work, and this is going to be what's going to save us and improve this feature. And then I remember that I also worked in tech organizations that we need to move away from opinions, and we need to move away from them. We need to use data. When in reality, opinions, they are kind of really good actually to think about new ideas in a way, right? So opinions are just like ideas that in a way can be validated or tested in a way. And to me, the second part of the sentence is where this becomes the difference between just having like crazy opinions from like your boss, for instance, that thinks you should do this versus something that is a little bit more well-based. because it's made on basis of limited evidence. So limited evidence here means you'll have data, you'll have user research, you'll talk with the users, but you're never going to know the truth 100%, right? So it will be limited evidence all the time, but there will be some evidence that will help you into formulating these better opinions or better ideas, right? And the third part, which I think it's really cool, is that is the starting point for further investigation, right? So we're going to think about this proposed explanation. We're using evidence to kind of back it up. We're going to test it so we can keep investigating. We're going to keep learning about it. And this was what the team number 2 was doing in a way, right? We're kicking it off, learning more, and kind of getting closer to truth each experiment and hypothesis that we validate. So what are the main components if you see a hypothesis? Pretty simple. Like if we do this, then this will happen, right? This is the main part of the hypothesis. We believe that doing this, or if we do this, this is kind of where the idea comes from, then this will happen. And this part of the structure of the sentence is really interesting because it will bring you into a desired impact that you want to see, right? It will keep you close to the original problem. Then add to cart rates will go up, for instance. I'll use the example a little bit once again. But then there's another part here that you can add to your hypothesis that says, this is true if causation is proved, right? If causation is proved, in a way here, it's thinking or reflecting on a KPI that you have, that you want to improve, right? So I'm saying that if we do this, then this will happen. And this is true if this KPI improves or if this number improves, right? This is how you formulate a hypothesis that is testable. And then if it doesn't improve, you debunk the hypothesis, you learned something else from it. If the hypothesis is confirmed, you learn from it and you're moving forward learning more, right? Just the example that we used before, if we improve picture quality, then more users will add stuff in their cart. This is true if add to cart rates increase in the treatment group, right? Or in the people that in the population that will be in the experiment, right? So this is kind of how the main component kind of takes shape. So the first part, as I mentioned, this is the assumption idea. Then the second part is the desired effect. And the third one is the KPI, right? The idea and assumption here, improve picture quality, desired effect, more users adding to their cart, and KPI, add to cart rates increasing, right? And just wanted to make sure, because when you get into kind of these scientific approaches, people say, oh yeah, we're losing all the fun of it, and well, this is like, we cannot like have more crazy ideas anymore, and how I'm going to survive, it's all hypothesis, you know? And in reality, kind of the process doesn't change a bit, right? So the assumption or idea is still there. It's just that we're kind of creating a framework for the idea to be tested, right? We all love brainstorming, right? So what are the things that differentiate a good hypothesis from a not so good hypothesis, right? So I wanted just to go over it a little bit on what I think, at least, right? As I mentioned, this second part here to me is the key for what makes a good hypothesis versus a not so good one. It's made on basis of the limited evidence as a starting point for further investigation, right? So let's take a look. What is great supporting evidence? For instance, it's data, user research, benchmark, workshops and collaboration. Every time that you have more people thinking and discussing things, the better. Enables also for a specific learning. So there's sometimes that we use hypotheses and they get a little bit too big, right? If we release a new product, but something that is particularly key for good hypothesis is that they are kind of normally small, or they are kind of a small improvement. This kind of keeps the flow with all of the ideas of keeping like MVP and trying to isolate the learnings as much as possible, right? If we release a new product, for instance, I mean, it can be a hypothesis, but if you're trying to improve specific things, maybe you'll have like crippling effects and things can get too big and you'll take 1 year to learn whatever you want, right? So you try to move slowly but surely. And then also clearly states the desired improvement, right? So we're telling that we believe that something will happen. This is the impact that we're expecting to see. And then we have a KPI that will enable us to learn if it's working or not. And then we have the not so good hypothesis, right? And in this case, what are not so good hypotheses is really easy to identify. It's all the opposite than a good hypothesis is, right? It's just a random idea, no supporting data, unclear improvement, and means to prove causation are not clear as well. It's just like, oh, we should do this, perhaps, I don't know, you know, it's just like a random idea. Now, actually, you need to put a lot of kind of work into kind of creating the good hypothesis, because getting all the data, the user research, the benchmark, the workshops, they all are really important. I have one last quote here, actually, before we go into the next step. There is another quotation about hypothesis, and this one's a little bit more about the opinion part that I was mentioning before, right? So Milan Kundera said that it does take great maturity to understand that the opinion we are arguing for is merely the hypothesis we favor, necessarily imperfect, probably transitory, which only very limited minds can declare to be certainty or truth, right? So I think this is the key part here about opinions, having ideas, and kind of trying to move forward of seeking the truth, right? And why I favor hypothesis so much in a way. Because it's completely human to admit that you don't know everything. Nobody is obliged to know everything. It's okay, because we're moving into a lot of uncertainty when we're developing products. We don't know what's going to work and what it's not going to work. We know that a lot of people have opinions, of course, but why not to take these opinions and kind of put them to test, right? And I think this is a framework that works out very well for that, and also for organizing your product and your roadmap. Thinking about where are the big problems that you're facing right now, how can you create hypotheses on top of them to validate and move forward, learning more about the problem, but also trying to solve it along the way. Hypothesis and backlog, some good structures to use. Now we're getting a little bit into product management stuff here, and I'll go a little bit over what I think it's a good hypothesis, where they fit in kind of the whole spectrum of things in the roadmap and in the backlog, right? This is a little bit, everybody that opened up Jira once in a while, maybe Trello, saw this structure, right? And the question is, where do hypotheses fit in here? We have initiatives, we have epics, and then you have user stories, and the user stories have tasks, they have subtasks, and can go on and on, as we know. The way that I like to think about it is into how to structure the mentality of having hypothesis driving all of this, is that your initiative is probably a problem area that you have, right? So add to cart rates dropping. I think it's a big enough problem area that you would like to solve, especially if you're in e-commerce, right? This is an initiative that can be not only worked on by a team, but by multiple teams, but that's probably a problem that quite important to try to solve, right? And then you have the epics. And to me, here's a great place where you can put a hypothesis on, right? So you can put here like the first hypothesis that you're going to work on. So you're trying to validate it. Can be a more major hypothesis, you know, that you're going to work on the design part of things. You can try to slice it in a way that you have a major hypothesis and then kind of sub-hypothesis that you're going to validate. And then you can use epics for that. And the user stories, they become simply experiments, right? Actually, in Soundcloud, we use something called experiment stories, where we have user stories that are actually telling the story of an experiment that we're going to run. They fit the same category there, and that's how we work it, right? And each experiment on top of a hypothesis can take different shapes, can be an iteration, can be an improvement. Oh, the pictures didn't improve. What about making the pictures bigger? What about making the pictures rounder? What about changing pictures for cartoons? So we can iterate on top of them with different experiments, trying to improve it and learn it about it, right? So I think that this is a good structure. This is the one that I use, for instance. And then if you look at about it and you think, okay, how can I put this together in place, right? And to me, it always starts with the problem. To me, this is kind of the foundation and what it's going to make everything kind of connect in a nice way. And add to cart rates are dropping. It's going to be, once again, the example that we're going to use here. So let's take a look. The first thing that I like to do is challenge the problem, right? What I mean by that is like, if you have a problem, you're thinking about the priorities that you have as a team, what you're going to work on next, how you're going to lead your team into the vision of the product and things like that, how you're going to execute on the roadmap. And you'll be hearing noise from everybody, oh, we should fix this, we should do that, etc. So this is a great exercise. Even if you found out the problems yourself, try to challenge it, right? So first question, is this a real problem? Compared to all the problems that we have right now, is this the biggest one, a real one, right? Actually, is this a real problem, right? Let's take a look to see if it's a problem at all. Second one is the biggest problem that we have at the moment, right? There's anything else that we should be focusing about? What are the numbers behind the rates dropping in revenue versus other things that are affecting revenue as well on the e-commerce, for instance? Another one, add to cart ratios dropping. This is really a business problem, right? What is in it for the user? So what is the user's part on this, right? So add to cart ratios dropping. This is just a number that you observe. What is in it for the users? Why users are not adding more stuff to their cart? Are they not finding stuff? So that's why you start also doing the work of kind of putting the users in the center, starting from there in order to kind of scope your problem a little bit better. What do we know about this problem, right? What is the data that is available? Have we done research? Have we interviewed users? Was this number better? There are seasonalities that play around it. And one that is super important for me, what solving this problem means, right? What success looks like. Is improving add to cart rates, or is improving revenue and whatever add to cart rates? What is really success here, and what we're actually trying to measure as to know if we're making progress or not. This is all kind of comes down to data. So obviously data would come into some part to me. All of these questions can be answered with, of course, data, quality data, quantitative data, interviewing users, user testing, and things like that. Why do I think that challenging the problem is so important? Because to me, they are the fuel for good hypothesis, right? This is where you're going to get your great supporting evidence in data, user research, benchmark, workshop, and collaboration to find ways of clearly stating the desired improvement that you want to have. So for me, this is all it's going to fuel your hypothesis in a good way in order to have the best ones and set a priority between them, right? And how to come up with these good hypotheses and experiments. Let's say that you have a lot of good supporting data. What now, right? There are multiple ways to do it, actually. To have good hypotheses, you can do it by your own. You can do it with design. You can do it with the team. There's multiple ways of doing it. Depends on each product team, each context, each industry, and things like that. I just think that there's one golden rule, right? I'll talk about one process that I use all the time, but before that, I want to say that there's always one golden rule, that is collaborate. And in hypothesis, this becomes to me even more important, right? Because people have different views, different perceptions of things. Collaborating here is, I think, a great way of kind of coming up with the best hypothesis possible, especially if everybody's on the same page with the same type of evidence to support your hypothesis and ideas. I was going to talk about one, right? One method that you can use that I think it's really powerful, and also talking about collaboration, this method is all about collaboration, which are design sprints, right? I think that design sprints are great for generating good hypotheses, right? So if you don't know about the design sprint, how the process, there's a lot of documentation, YouTube videos and books out there. Definitely can recommend some links. But simply put, a design sprint is a 5-day process where you try to solve a problem with a group of people, right? So in the first day, you try to map out, you bring all the information that you have, you create a map of all the information that exists. On Tuesday is the day where you're going to brainstorm, have a lot of ideas. Wednesday, you're going to make decisions on what are the best ideas that you want to, on Thursday, prototype, and then you're going to create these ideas and make them tangible so you can, on Friday, test ideas with users, right? And this is great because you can have engineering, design, product, data, everybody in the same place. And how does the hypothesis come up, right? So Monday is all about talking about problem, and if there's some hypothesis that exists already, present them, right? Mapping is all about kind of looking at the problem, trying to find the different data that you have about it and things like that. On Tuesday, it's the time to get more hypotheses going and think about experiments that you want to run. And then you'll decide on the best ones, you're prototyping, and the testing, if you're doing, like, for instance, an A/B test, it will get you causation. Is actually that what's happening, right? That I talked in the beginning. So let's see, next steps, right? Going back after you do a design sprint, for instance, and you have hypotheses and you have like now an idea of what you're going to test live with the product. Go back to the golden rule, right? Use the available evidence to prioritize your hypothesis and let the team weigh in. Kind of get the team involved in the process of kind of deciding what's kind of the best hypothesis that you can validate. They have always great ideas, right? Find your MVEs. What are MVEs? Those are the most valuable experiments. So instead of an MVP, a most valuable product, you're going to try to find the most valuable experiment. What's the best and quickest way to validate this hypothesis, right? This comes into thinking in design. How can we shape up an experiment that it's going to bring the validation or the learning that we want out of this hypothesis, right? And then experiment, learn, and iterate, right? This is pretty much how you go from there, right? You're going to test it out. You're going to come back with data. You're going to look at it. There's an iteration here. We should stop. We should think about something else. And this is how you move forward, validating hypothesis after hypothesis and learning, iterating, and then experimenting again. And then some closing remarks, and just like before we jump into Q&A, some reflections on how this practice can help with stress a little bit, which to me, it's something that kind of think it's really interesting to talk about, and to be one of the big advantages of working with hypothesis, right? Because working sometimes in tech companies and working with product sometimes can be really stressful, right? But hypothesis, I believe, can help with that. If you think about the scenario here, the team that was thinking about a better product pictures on the product detail page, they thought that this was going to work. It was an improvement that failed. Then the team felt that they failed. Then they went into under pressure from all different ways, or from some ways, right? You can have like external pressure from stakeholders saying that failed, you need to fix it. You can have internal pressure from your team saying, okay, we need to improve. And also you can have individual pressure. You think, okay, I did enough, right? I couldn't do it. So pressure from all sides. Where the other side of hypothesis, it was debunked. So you learned, the team is motivated to move on learning, right? There's a big part of it. Yeah, we're still not there in solving the problem, but we're one step closer for sure, because we're learning along the process, right? We're not kind of having all of this kind of pressure on ourselves, because we're learning and moving forward. This to me also, why one team would have pressure and the other one wouldn't? Because in the end, if you have a backlog of hypotheses, you're playing around with expectations from yourself, with others. Even though you don't know if better product pictures on PDP is going to work or not, if you stay on top of the improvement for 2 weeks, 1 month, 3 sprints, whatever, you'll start slowly believing that this is going to work out, right? This is a natural process that happens. And then you're also making a promise that you're going to deliver an improvement that will improve something. So you have expectations set on something that perhaps won't happen. And in the other way around, if your expectation from the hypothesis is that you're going to learn, nevertheless, whatever it happens, and you might also solve the problem, then it's way easier to manage, in my opinion, at least. So once again, this is my opinion, not like something that it's something really specific. I read in a couple of articles similar things, but it's feelings that I've got from working with this process for a while now. And that's it. I hope I didn't went over time, but that's what I had to share. And yeah, maybe we can go into Q&A. You can find me at handle Tobias Rieth in most places, LinkedIn and things like that.